Hello, everyone. I wanted to turn around and spend some time talking about training and development. This is hopefully going to be one of a handful of slides I'm going to make, uh, presentations I'm going to make on training and development. And with a little bit of luck, everything will hopefully go well. First of all, I want to add some material to what is already in the textbook, not a lot. So keep in mind that if you're listening to this and trying to take notes, feel free to pause it and turn around and write things down and continue on. So let's get started. You notice that the first thing I put up there was the term training and development. And I think it deserves an explanation of what the difference is between the two aspects. So let me go through this here real quick. When it comes to training, training basically is the learning of job-related behaviors. Now, your book turns around and says that training really boils down to including skills and concepts and rules and attitudes, and those are all correct. I just consider them part of job-related behaviors. There's no doubt about them. Some are very specific skills that you have to learn, and some tend not to be. The fact of the matter is that training is very, very specialized, and that's what a lot of it's all about. Now, development, on the other hand, is learning general goals and general skills. Very valuable. They're not specific hands-on things that an employee may use. They're fairly generalized, as I like to say it. Okay, and when I talk about these, what I'm referring to a lot of times is things like motivation, stress, conflicts in the workplace. I actually have done presentations on conflicts in the workplace and how to address those kind of things. So training is very much the behavior-oriented aspects. Development is basically furthering your current knowledge. Now, before we do any of these kind of things, I want to tell you why we would even go ahead and do these. We do a lot of training and follow-up development a lot of times because the employee needs it. They lack the skills. Maybe they are just starting with the company. Maybe they've been with the company for a while and they still don't have it. So lacking the skills can be a big part of it. The newest thing that we see with a lot of technology today is that training goes on because your current skills have become obsolete. Uh, we even go through that here at OTC once in a while, and that can be an issue. Technology changes, platforms change, we have to learn the new thing, and so on. So how do we determine if it's necessary to do training? And that really should be your first step. You just don't jump in and start doing training. You have to determine if there's a need. And that's where we talk about what's called a needs analysis, all right? Now, when it comes to a needs analysis, you're analyzing if training is really necessary. And there are three types of analysis that your book mentions. And I really like to talk about a fourth one as well. The first one that you see there is what is called an organizational analysis. And we're going to go through each of these step by step. All right. That looks at if is the organization ready and able to go through the training necessary. The second is what you see there called a task analysis, and that's learning the specific tasks that employees do and to see if they need training on those tasks, yes or no. And then finally, a person analysis. Not every single employee needs training. How do we determine if employees do or do not need training? Okay, so let's go through the organizational analysis first. All right. Basically, when we talk about an organizational analysis, we're asking ourselves, is an organization ready for training? Okay, is an organization ready for training? Um, Simply put, that's not always the case. There are some factors to consider if an organization is really ready for training. For example, the cost of training. Sometimes you're bringing in outside sources, third parties to do training, and it's not cheap. Can you afford it? Can you turn around and have the money and budget to do these kind of things? And sometimes the answer is yes. We have excess money, we have extra money, we can do training. And sometimes employers have to say, absolutely not, we don't have the money for it. Another factor in training is that a lot of times to train employees, you've got to take them off their current job, whatever that job may be. and you can take them one at a time, or a lot of times you may take them as a big group. Well, can you afford to have a number of people away from the job at a single time? And once again, sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. All right, so that has to be taken into consideration. Another thing that really will influence if an organization is willing to go through training is their current turnover rates. And hopefully, you know what a turnover rate is. That means employees quit. All right. If you are in a situation where turnover rates are high within your organization, it serves no purpose to spend all the money to do training and then to see an employee turn around and quit on you within a week, a month, 30 days, maybe 90 days or 180 days. You know, you've spent all this money on them, you're not getting a return on your investment. And that definitely can be a problem. So really what I'm saying here is that training must include what I call a supportive environment. The employees have to be on board with this, okay? Because if they're not compensated, if employees are stressed, if they're not motivated, if they're not taken care of, then basically training is not well received. All right. So, and if training is not well received, you've got yourself a problem. So, really, the question you've got to ask yourself is, does an organization possess a positive climate for training? All right. Because if they're not going to take to it, then you're wasting your time and your money. Um, if the answer is no, and they are not ready for this, then you've got to fix the climate within your organization. Can you change compensations? Can you turn around and create a higher job satisfaction level? Can you increase morale such that training is going to be better? Once again, if the answer is no, you got to fix those things. But if the answer is yes, if the answer is yes, then you can move on to the second level, and that is what we call a task analysis. When it comes to task analysis, what we're talking about here is identifying tasks within an organization that employees do. And there's really two ways to do this. One of the first things you can do is look at a current job description. Now, assuming a job description is written and up to date and lists all the duties and the tasks and so on and so forth, then you can just rely on that. But if you don't have an up-to-date job description, you may have to go back and do the job analysis, as we mentioned previously, through interviews and other methods to figure out what the job is all about, and then go from there. So really, the first step here, okay, is to identify what it is that the employee does. I think your book says identify the tasks performed, and that makes perfect sense. You identify the task performed. But once that's all said and done, okay, then you turn around and determine how often the job is done. When I refer to conditions, I'm talking about conditions under which these tasks are done, whatever the duties are. Do you do them daily? Do you do them often? Do you do them rarely? Do you hardly do them at all? Lord knows you don't want to go through expensive training for something that employees rarely, if ever, have to deal with. And if their level of importance is pretty low, then why do them? Okay. Finally, you want to identify the KSAs. And if you remember the KSAs, these are the knowledge and the skills and the ability. These are your competencies needed to perform the task. It's not just the tasks themselves, but what is it you need to know? What skill must you have? What ability must you bring to the job? All right? Because knowing these are very, very important, just like knowing the tasks and so on. All right? Once you get this all listed out, okay, once you know the tasks, a lot of times it's very important then that you determine how well people currently know them. So let's say you've done the job analysis or looked over the description, you have your KSAs, you know when they're done, you know when the tasks are performed. Next, you need to determine, in essence, how good are people at this given task, all right? And what I would recommend a lot of people do, and your book does as well, is just to list them. List the tasks that are the duties that are part of a person's job. And then ask yourself, how is that task learned? How are they exposed to that? Now, I took this from our textbook, and it's really a good little example. Where basically you list the tasks that are there for an employee. I think it was a bank teller. Answer customer questions about rates, process customer transactions, calm an irate customer, check loan applications for accuracy, and so on. Once you've listed the job duties, then it may take some time of doing surveys. It makes take some time of interviewing employees and ask them or their bosses, how did they learn this information? Now, if the answer is pretty clear cut, the daily rate charts will tell you interest rates, and that's how you answer that question. Process transactions. Well, that's part of your initial training, and they do that. Call irate customers. We don't teach that. Well, there you go. That's a part of the job that's important, and you cannot identify how and when that is taught and trained. That may be something you need to do. Okay. It goes on as the example, check loan applications for accuracy. Well, there's a loan processing course you had to take when you came on board, so we know that that's been learned. Turn around and ask customers to complete applications. When do you do that? The answer is nobody knows when that's done. Well, that may be something that needs to be taught, and so on. So when you determine your tasks by using a job analysis and job description, and you figure up your KSAs, and you turn around and figure the conditions, how often they happen and under what conditions, it's a good idea to do this type of analysis to determine if they're truly learned or not. Okay. The last thing you have to take into consideration is basically the fact that not everybody has to go through training. There are some people that may understand a process, and there are some people that may not. And so with that in mind, we talk about what's called a person analysis. And this basically involves the process of determining who needs training and who doesn't need training. All right. There are different ways of conducting a person analysis to determine who needs training. You can look at prior performance appraisals, who scored well, who didn't score well. They can be an indicator that there is a problem. All right. You might just sit down and ask people in an interview, okay, do you need training or not? Now, some people will try to hide that. They don't want the world to find out, their boss to find out that they don't know something, and they'll often tell you they're fine. But you can interview supervisors, you can interview other individuals relevant to the job to possibly find out who needs this, or you can do surveys, and that's another way that this can be done as well. So those are the three big ones: the organizational analysis, the task analysis, and the person analysis. That's what your book talks about. I think there are others, and I know that there are others. And so I wanted to go ahead and share a few other signs that that training is needed. All right. And one of the simple things that your book doesn't mention, and I want you to know, is that management can possibly request it. That does happen if you have a training department or a third party. You come to the realization that you or your people are unaware how something works, and so they just simply approach you. They may do it for themselves, they may do it for their employees, but that is definitely a way of determining if it is necessary, yes or no. And then really the other way to determine if there is a problem, because employees will sometimes try to hide it, is to start to look at records, okay? Turnover rates, absenteeism. We find a lot of times when employees are very unhappy, absenteeism tends to go up. If it's on a production line, you can look at production rates. If people are producing at a sufficient rate as expected, are their level of defects high or low? It may tell you something about the need for training in that regard. So this is basically a breakdown of what it takes to know these things. Hope this helps you out. And once again, if you have any questions, email me, give me a call, or come by my office. Thanks a bunch.